Well, our Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg's partner, Chasten Buttigieg, wants you to know that life is challenging for him and Mayor Pete. Not only does Pete, aka Poot Buttigieg, if you go by the Lawrence O'Donnell pronunciation from MSNBC, not only do they have to pretend that he mainly rides bikes around all day so it looks like he's into green energy or whatever, like when he biked to that cabinet meeting a few months ago and he had a mask on and then he got picked up in an SUV. We saw it. But now the hardships, according to Chasten Buttigieg, Mr. Buttigieg, continue to grow for the Buttigiegs. It seems that some people can't get a break from Bidenflation, not even the people in Biden's cabinet, like Transportation Secretary Mayor Pete. Now, according to Chasten Buttigieg, it's too expensive to live in Washington, D.C., which is an economy that we should point out is almost entirely funded by American taxpayers. It is a government town, after all. So if it's expensive, who are you going to blame? Anyway, Chasten says that the one-bedroom apartment they enjoy is $4,500. I know, grab onto a table. And, guys, gals, doesn't even have a den. Yeah, it's like living in the favelas of Brazil for the Buttigiegs. I mean, first, you have Pete Buttigieg. He has to ride this bike around, and it's not even electric. And by ride the bike around, I mean he rides it just a little bit, and then he has to get into an SUV because he's not going to ride it all the way back to his $4,500 super swanky in a brand new building, nice part of town apartment. Chasten is complaining about the $4,500 apartment, which doesn't come with a den. They might as well, I don't know, they might as well live in the slums under a bridge with trolls or something, or with the homeless in Austin. And Pete is Transportation Secretary, so what gives? Chasten had this to say about their living conditions, and I quote, "We're doing fine for ourselves, and the city is almost unaffordable," which tells you how extremely unaffordable it is for many people, end quote. Now, the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, who got the job because he knew buses, his salary, I'm not kidding, his salary is $221,400, which is over 3 times the average salary of residents in the Capitol. But he can't even get a den in his one-bedroom apartment, for Pete's sake. You get it? For Pete's sake? Yeah. Anyway, according to the British outlet Daily Mail, it says that Chasten now says they play Zillow Price is Right and try to guess the out-of-reach appraisal values of homes they admire and then look up the actual estimate online. He did admit that he sees the charm in D.C. and understands the people who are very in love with this city. Well, apparently the Buttigiegs are past the honeymoon phase and the bloom is off the rose, as they say. The nest is not quite cutting it for Chasten. I guess they can always dream of a better life, of those D.C. houses that are just out of reach. Maybe Mayor Pete could take all of his transportation knowledge and get a private sector job with Tesla or Virgin Atlantic, and then they could afford a decent place to live. I mean, after all, Mayor Pete has the wealth of transportation knowledge. He is a mayor from a small town in Indiana with absolutely no subways and only a modest transportation infrastructure at best, but no matter, because he's the transportation secretary now, right? That means he's an expert on moving around in things. He knows the roads and stoplights. And besides, Mayor Pete knows pretty much all he really needs to know in the Biden administration about transportation, and that is this: highways are racist. Yeah, he actually said it. Look it up. Google it. Go to the Google box or DuckDuckGo it. But then, of course, his thoughts on that shouldn't surprise you, because every single thing that the Biden administration proposes is about fighting racism, and yes, even the highways. Sidebar, even though their party is actually responsible for the Urban Renewal Act, which destroyed historically black communities and made it impossible for those neighborhoods to flourish in the future, but I digress. See, Pete's just following the script that they gave him. I whispered that last thing. Did you guys hear it? Just like that dumb bike that he has to ride, the one that he can't even put Chasten on the back of. Do they still have the bikes? I mean, they still got the bikes with the baby seats, right? The little baby seats, and you put the baby in the back, and they got, right? With any, or brilliant idea, put him in a basket like E.T. With any luck, he and Chasten can find a decent apartment with a den someday. Everybody wants a den, right? What do you do in dens? I don't even know what a den's for. But with Bidenflation to deal with, it's not going to come cheap for the Buttigiegs. You just wouldn't understand, but that's okay. Having a $4,500 a month apartment is all part of the sacrifices and hardships that Mayor Pete, now Transportation Secretary Pete, and Chasten have to make to be a public servant in America. Now, if they could just find one big enough to park Pete's bike.